After you've played Raid Shadow Legends for any amount of time, you are eventually going to be starting to get some epic champions rolling into your roster. Whether that be from the sign-up link that you used, which we'll talk about mine in just a second here, or just some luck from the ancient shards or the sacred shards. You're going to have some epics that come through. But what epics are worth looking out for? What epics are worth pouring these precious resources into to 6-star them and ascend them, and they're gonna give you some good progress on your account? Well, I've got 10 epics I'm gonna go over real quickly for you and to let you know which champions are worthwhile. But before we do that, make sure to drop a like and subscribe on the video, everybody. Now, if the content today has you interested in trying Raid Shadow Legends, you can sign up with my link in the description or in the pinned comment to this video to get the free epic champion Zargala for free. After reaching level 15, you will get the epic champion Hugo, a great cleanser and debuff supporter. From March 5th to March 31st, you can use the code Supreme6 to get another legendary champion, Supreme Gallic, on any new raid account. In addition, you'll get 300,000 silver, potions for leveling, and an XP barrel that will max your character's level, all for free. So just make sure to check out my link in the description. But without further ado, let's go in and start talking about some of the epic champions that are worthwhile here in Raid Shadow Legends. So the first one we're going to take a look at is actually in the Undead Hordes. Scrolling down here in the Undead Hordes, in our dark category here, we have Vogoth. Now, Vogoth is a very cool looking unit over here, but what makes Vogoth so valuable? Well, Vogoth is going to be huge in pretty much all of the dungeons. Spider, Fire Knight, or Dragon, or Ice Golem, he's going to be a huge help in there. Why is he going to be a huge help in there? Vogoth is an insane tank for your account, and that's because of a few abilities in his kit. First being his Festering Dynamo, which whenever this champion is attacked, it heals all allies by 50% of the damage received, which makes him great for being a tank. Pairing with that, he's also got a Provoke in his kit that also adds a decrease attack, making it easier for him to tank and also mitigate the damage that he's receiving. But the final piece that's useful in his kit is the Leech in his kit. If he is attacked, he will place a Leech debuff on the attacker for 2 turns, as well if the attacker is under Provoke, which is in his kit. The debuff placed by the champion also has a 70% chance of increasing the cooldown of a random skill on the attacker by 2 turns. Now, in case you don't know, Leech is a debuff that actually has some passive healing along with it too. Any champion that attacks a champion with Leech debuff heals for 18% of the inflicted damage, allowing healing to pass to your allies as well. So he is a great tank and a great unit to keep an eye out for. Next, we're going to switch over to the Orcs, and we are going to be taking a look at an epic champion here. It is the Seer, a Void champion. Now, the Seer is going to be another strong champion for the various dungeons in Raid, especially in the hard mode for Spider Knight, Dragon, and Ice Golem as well. Seer is killer for destroying large waves of enemies, like in Spider, for example, where there's just a massive group of them because of her Karma Burn. This ability allows her to remove all buffs from all allies and enemies, then attacks all enemies. The damage is increased according to the number of removed buffs. It also has a 50% chance of placing a sleep debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. So while you're losing those buffs, she's placing the debuff that's still going to help with the sustain. The chance of placing a sleep debuff increases by 5% for each buff removed, and it inflicts less damage to bosses, but that's why she's huge for clearing those enemy waves. So definitely a really strong champion to keep an eye out for. We're going to keep moving on to the next one now though. We're moving a little bit quicker because I don't want this video to be 10 hours long, but the next champion we're going to take a look at is in the Sacred Order, and the champion is Godseeker Iniri. Now, Godseeker Iniri has some really good application in clan bosses, for Hydra, Amonis, Doom Tower, as well as the Iron Twins and the Sand Devil. Being Void obviously gives her a leg up in terms of not having any weaknesses against her, but she just has an overall really strong support kit. So on her first skill, she has the ability to attack an enemy, and this will also heal the ally with the lowest HP by 5% of their max HP, and the damage is based on defense. So you're going to be stacking both HP and defense on this champion, really helping with sustain. In addition to that, attacks on all enemies heals all allies by 15% of their max HP, then decreases the duration of all buffs on all enemies by 1 turn, and increases the duration of all buffs on all allies by 1 turn. So both, while boosting your own team's buffs, you're decreasing the enemies as well. And then also on her skill 3, revives a dead ally with 50% HP, then fills their turn meter by 50% and resets the cooldown on all of their skills. Basically allowing, if your main DPS drops down, gets the revive off and allows them to come in swinging with basically no spin up time. It is a huge boost. Her passive as well just increases the amount of healing allies receives by 10%, just also upping that sustain. And she has an active effect. If an ally is about to get killed by a fatal hit, preempts that hit and instantly places a revive on death buff on them for 1 turn before the damage is taken. So she is just an insane sustainer and has basically like universal applicability for her kit. Definitely another strong champion. Now, another epic champion that some of you may have on your account, also still found within the Sacred Order, is Deacon Armstrong. Now, you can get Armstrong through a promo code in Raid, but this is another champion that's just got some really good ability in the various dungeons of Raid. He's a really strong turn meter manipulator, so if you're trying to decrease the attacks of the bosses or the different enemies or in PvP, he is going to slow them down. His skill 3 fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%, as well as decreasing the turn meter of all enemies by 15%, and it grants an extra turn. On top of that, getting 2 skill books applied in there will reduce the cooldown by 2, allowing him to apply that every 3 turns, which is just going to be insane for pushing your team forward. On top of that, his sweeping retribution attacks all enemies and has an 80% chance of placing 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns, and the damage is based on attack. As well, we talked about it previously, the leech debuff, he also has that part of his kit too, just making another really strong support unit. Now, previously when we talked about Vogoth, I didn't mention this unit, but he is another unit that's going to pair super well with him, and he's actually part of the Dwarves faction, and this unit is Geomancer. He's basically universally strong in almost every single game mode of this game because he's got a pretty cracked kit. On his skill 1, he attacks all enemies and has a 30% chance of placing 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns, really helping with some sustain. The damage on is based on attack. Removes all buff from a target enemy and then attacks that enemy. So when you're dealing with solo bosses, being able to strip that off is super useful. Steals all buffs instead if the target is under an HP burn, which we do know is part of his kit on his skill 3, but we'll get back to that in just a second. And then he reduces the cooldown of his Quicksand Grasp by 2 turns if the target is killed by this skill while under an HP burn debuff, which is placed by this champion. So that HP burn is part of his Quicksand Grasp. Fully depletes the target's turn meter. Fully, that's huge. Fills this champion's turn meter by the amount the target loses, so basically giving him a complete second turn, and has a 75% chance of placing HP burn and a 25% weaken debuff on the target for 3 turns. He's just an insane turn manipulator, and he's huge for all the different bosses in the game and all the dungeons, so an insane unit to get if you manage to pick him up. Now, the next unit, if you've been following my channel for a little while now, is not going to be a surprise to you, but it is Demetha. Demetha is another really strong healer. She's got a shield application on her skill 1, which is based on max HP. She increases the duration of ally buffs by 1 turn and decreases the duration of ally debuffs by 1 turn, helping them fall off a little bit faster. She also heals the team when doing so. She also has a block damage, which can be huge for boss nukes when that comes into play. She can block damage on all allies for 1 turn and has a 15% continuous heal buff on her turn as well. She basically is another almost like a universal application, can be used in so many different game modes. A great pickup for a support unit if you have not yet already. But now we're going to jump factions and we're going to go back into the Dark Elves, back into the dark times. And we're going to talk about Dark Kael. Dark Kael is extremely strong in dungeons, and that's because of his really cracked out kit. The first one, he attacks one enemy 3 times, and each hit has a 25% chance of instantly to activate 2 poison debuffs, or 1 poison debuff and 1 HP burn debuff. Basically meaning instant proc on the poison instead of needing to wait until the enemy's turn. So you're getting multiple hits on it. Attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns, really helping with sustain. And each critical hit also has a 75% chance of increasing the duration of all debuffs on the target by 1 turn, keeping those poison stacks on even longer. And then on his Reality Acid, has a 75% chance of placing 3 5% poison debuffs and a 25% poison sensitivity debuff on the target for 2 turns. He's just going to be doing an insane amount of damage with his poison application, going to keep it on there longer and going to help detonate it. And just in addition to that, with his passive, he's going to decrease the crit rate of enemies under 2 or more poison debuffs by 15%. So just very easy to apply on his kit, just with how the rest of it is structured together. So just another really strong DPS unit, a really good pickup if you get a chance to. Next, we're going to be jumping over to a different faction here. We're going to jump over to our Skinwalkers. Akamatum. Akemtum. I don't know how to say that. Akemtum is another unit to definitely keep an eye out for a few different reasons. Kind of like Kale, he does have attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 4% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. If a target is under a hex debuff for each, it also has a 40% chance of applying debuff spread effect and takes 1 random debuff from the target, placing it on all enemies. So really helping get that debuff, those poisons applied all around. Attacks all enemies 3 times. Each hit has a 60% chance of increasing the duration of any hex debuffs on the enemy by 1 turn. If enemies are not under a hex debuff, each hit has a 6% chance of placing a hex debuff for 2 turns. Again, helping with the debuff spread. We're doing a lot. Has an 80% chance of inflicting damage from 1 poison debuff to enemies under hex debuff and their allies receiving the damage from poisons as part of his passive. It's so basically, in case all of that sounded like gobbledygook, it's all it is that he's going to be applying tons of poison and hex debuffs on the team, and continuing to attack is going to just make them spread across the team even more. Pairing him with a unit like Dark Kale, which is going to be detonating more of those poison debuffs and extending their duration, is just going to be poison stack city when you are using them in tandem. So definitely another strong unit to keep an eye out for. We're going to jump factions again, and we're going on to our 9th unit that we're going to be talking about in the epic category, and that is going to be the Man-Eater. Now, he might not look that crazy, but check this out. Kind of like some of the other units on the list, he's got some great turn meter manipulation. So first things first, on his skill 1, he attacks one enemy, places a 50% decrease attack debuff on all enemies if this attack is critical. So insane for sustain and mitigating damage. On his second skill, attacks one enemy, fully depletes the target's turn meter, fills this champion's turn meter equal to the amount the target loses, very similar to the Geomancer from previous. So huge on the manipulation there. And then on top of that, if this champion receives damage, then places an unkillable buff and a block debuffs on all allies for 2 turns. Damage received is equal to 5% max HP for each ally alive. So it's just really, really strong on the sustain department, on the debuff department. He's another great unit to keep an eye out for. And the last unit actually also comes from the Ogryn tribe, and is one we talked about previously, but we're gonna double down on that, and that is Yugo. Yugo is a very strong debuffer and has a few things in their kit. One, has a leech application. We talked about leech applications earlier and what leech does. On top of that, decreased defense, block buffs on the kit, huge for multiple different bosses throughout the game. And on top of that, has a heal, removes all heal reduction debuffs from all allies, so a nice cleanse, and then removes 1 random debuff from all allies, then heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. So not only are you getting some great leech for some additional healing, you're dropping a decreased defense, you are blocking buffs on the enemy team or the enemy boss, and then you're also cleansing debuffs from your team. It is just all around great utility for various game modes in Raid Shadow Legends. And you can get this champion for free. You don't have to use shards for them. Like I said earlier in the video, make sure to use my link in the description or in the pinned comment to this video to get the free epic champion Zargala. And after reaching level 15, you'll also get the free epic champion Yugo. 2 great epic champions to get your new raid account started off right. From March 5th to March 31st, you can use the code Supreme6 to get another legendary champion, Supreme Gallic, on any new raid account. Also, this is going to include 300,000 silver, potions for leveling, and an XP barrel that's going to max your character's level, all for free. So make sure to check out my link in the description. But that's going to be it for this video, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.